Hello there, and welcome back to J Hutch Talks Too Much. I am J Hutch, and with me is Daniel Demois, back for his second visit on J Hutch Talks Too Much. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thanks for having me back, Mr. Hutch.
Yeah. So Daniel is, of course, well, I should say we're going to be talking tonight about the Marx Brothers film Duck Soup. It was their fifth movie that they made, and it's my personal favorite of their movies. But I love a lot of their movies, and this is probably not going to be the only one we talk about on the show, but it's the first one we're going to talk about, and I'm happy to have Daniel here to talk about it with. Daniel, of course, is my cousin, but he is not just my cousin, which is more than I could say for Fred. But we don't have a cousin named Fred. But nevertheless, he's also an independent theater owner in several cities throughout Southern Ontario. Would you like to discuss that for a moment? What your the theater?
Sure. Yeah, we run we operate run and operate the Fox Theater in Toronto, the Apollo Cinema in Kitchener, and more recently we reopened the Bytown Cinema in Ottawa. So those are cinemas that play kind of arty films, rep stuff, and classics like the ones we're talking about today. We actually, I think, had a Marx Brothers fest probably 8 years ago or so at either the Fox or maybe it was the Review when we were running the Review for a while.
Cool.
As well. Yeah.
Do you remember how that went?
Poorly. I remember it went poorly. I don't think the attendance was great, and
right.
And that was a devastating blow to the ego, and it was tough. But you always want people to come out to see the movies that you love, but it doesn't always work out that way. Maybe if it wasn't a matinee, it would have done better. But you would think.
Well, that is kind of what I'd like to talk a little bit about today, because I as I do say on this show, the unpopular is important, and I do think that it would be great if these movies survived through a couple more generations. Would be nice, at least. And because I think that they're fantastic. So I do, in some ways, if people haven't watched Duck Soup or other Marx Brothers movies before, especially the early ones, I do highly recommend them. And if you watch this, maybe you'll be inspired to watch them. I have one thing that I do want to do. I promised Daniel this is the only one that I came up with something for, but I wanted to try my hand a little bit with something Marx Brothers-esque. So here's what I got. Here's what I said. Hold on a second. It doesn't quite work when you say that you wrote it down, but I was going to say, when you bought the Bytown, did you did you say the Bytown? All right, for those prices, I could buy the town, but that's not saying much for the town.
That was my opening line.
Right. That's all I'll do. So Duck Soup, this movie comes out in 1933. I'm just trying to think if this is the oldest movie I've done so far on the show. I'm not sure. It might be, but it goes back pretty far. I was thinking we should maybe try to summarize the movie first, but this will be the same problem that I had last week when we did The Trial by Kafka. It's just a hard thing to actually summarize. So, but it is basically.
Yeah, that's interesting that they both have that same problem. Yeah.
They both have the same problem. They're very, very different texts, but they both have that same problem. So, so please step in here. But I'll start off just by saying that it's about this fictional country called Fredonia, where this Rufus T. Firefly, played by Groucho Marx, becomes the new leader. Any attempts to summarize this are ridiculous, because the plot really is so meaningless in this movie. But Groucho Marx, playing Rufus T. Firefly, becomes the leader. There's this other guy named Trentino who is trying to annex Fredonia into his own country, Sylvania. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And everybody's aware of this, and so Rufus T. Firefly comes up with an idea that he's going to get Trentino so irate that Trentino will slap Rufus T. Firefly in the face, and then they can throw him out of the country. But what ends up happening is that Trentino gets Groucho Marx Rufus irate, and Rufus slaps Trentino. Do you remember what the word is that he calls him that gets him so upset?
Oh, he calls him an upstart.
Yeah, an upstart. That's the word, an upstart. He calls him much worse words before that, but it's upstart.
Yeah, a worm. Was it a worm?
Yeah, calls him a worm at one point. But it's upstart that really bothers him. And then they go back and forth in this, and there's various machinations. But eventually, the two countries decide to go to war. They do go to war, and then the Fredonia wins. I would say that that's essentially the bare bones plot. Am I getting anything wrong, or am I missing anything?
No, you're not missing anything. There's a small subplot with a lemonade stand guy, but that's not really integral to what's happening between Fredonia and Sylvania.
Well, let's talk about the lemonade stand for a minute, because I was thinking this just when I was rewatching this again the other night, which was, what does this have to do with anything that's going on in this movie? And I'm not sure. Like, it doesn't even have much to do with what's going on with the Harpo Marx and Chico Marx subplot.
No, it has no. It's got nothing to do. I don't think it has anything to do with the plot. It seems like it's just probably some kind of carryover from their vaudeville days, and maybe a nice bit of business that they wanted to include in the film. And I would argue that it's some of the funnier stuff for me.
It's very funny.
I know some people don't care for it because they think because it does have nothing to do with the plot. But,
right.
But it's just pure chaos, and that's one of the things that we come to the Marx Brothers for.
That's right. I mean, that's really the whole point of the Marx Brothers is just that they are chaotic. They're an anarch. The word that gets kind of used a lot is that they're kind of an anarchic form of comedy, because they come into a room and they inevitably disturb everything that's going on. And actually, I was just thinking about this. This is not going to work well for the people who are just listening to this, but for those who are watching, this is just for you. That the people who act with the Marx Brothers, I've decided that they have one move that they can go to all the time, which is this.
Yeah.
If they can do that, then they're good to act with the Marx Brothers.
Yeah. And the guy who plays the lemonade salesman, I don't know much about him, but apparently he's a noted comic actor himself, who some would say was kind of slumming it a little bit by taking this tiny role in this movie. But I just love the they kind of just start picking on this guy, and it's like a rivalry that comes back 2 or 3 times throughout the movie. And he keeps getting his hat burnt. They keep lighting his hat on fire. They keep destroying his lemonade stand and shooing away his customers, basically, or scaring away his customers. And I can only attribute it. Some people say that it's based on pure just being mean guys. But it seems to have started because he seems to have started it a little bit, because he said, "Hey, don't fight in front of my lemonade stand," and because they were having a bit of a quarrel. So I think once you try and reprimand those Marx Brothers, you're kind of digging your own grave there.
That's true. That's right. Exactly. So yeah, just to explain it a little bit for those who haven't seen it, so Harpo and Chico, I guess, have some sort of part-time job as peanut vendors.
Yes, when they're not spying, when they're not government spies. Yes.
When they're not government spies, they're also part-time peanut vendors.
Yes.
They happen to be working in close proximity with a lemonade vendor, which you think that's a marriage made in heaven right there, just the two of them paired up together. And but the lemonade vendor gets, and by the way, he's played by a guy named Edgar Kennedy. Edgar Slow Burn Kennedy, and he got the nickname Slow Burn because he's constantly working himself up into a huff.
There we go.
So, but yeah, they get into this. I mean, I think the funniest bit with them is the hat sequence, like where he's trying to put on his hat, and they keep getting him to put on the wrong hat, and but they do get into there's a lot of conflict between Chico and Harpo and the Lemonade Guy. It is one of the funniest moments. But that does speak to kind of what we were talking about right before the show started, which was that, you know, this movie, most of the early Marx Brothers, the first 5 Paramount Marx Brothers movies, are very thin on plot. They're very heavy on jokes. But you were saying that you think that this movie, and I would agree that this movie is thinner on plot than any other Marx Brothers movie.
Yeah, thinner on plot. Like it's definitely the shortest of probably all of their films that they made. I think that's right, but definitely of the first 5. And it is thin on plot. You don't really have as much of, for anybody who's seen those early films or the later films, there's always kind of a bit more of a subplot where there's a bit of interest with like a young couple that's trying to, who knows what, trying to make it work, or they have some kind of scheme going on, and the Marx Brothers get kind of wrapped up in it. More like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern type characters, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think that by losing that, it's kind of, you know, by making Groucho the main character and by making him the plot really focuses on his plot, and yeah, it really trims all of the things that some people might find boring. Like, I think that's why Duck Soup might be a perfect introductory film for a lot of modern audiences, because it doesn't have any of that, not melodrama, but like the romance that maybe would be necessary for films of the period to keep an audience interested.
Yeah.
It also cuts the musical numbers, which were typical of them, because, and that would take up like 10 minutes of screen time usually, just between the Chico piano playing and Harpo's harp solo or harp playing. So just by cutting those things up, it's just such a rapid fire event. The whole thing just sails by, which is also why it's kind of weird that they do have anything that isn't associated with the plot, like the lemonade stand. It does kind of stand out a little bit because it doesn't advance the plot any. It seems like just a gag that would be interspersed through any of the other films, but it is the funniest stuff for my, just watching Harpo angrily just knock the peanuts out of his hand for no reason is just the best.
Yeah.
Like it's the simplest and funniest thing to me.
Yeah, it is. I would agree with that too. And it is like there is, maybe I'm there's something about me that's just tuned towards like visual gags, and I think that there are some people who like visual stuff and some people that don't. So I do tend to like genuinely like laugh, not just like say, oh, that's amusing. I do tend to genuinely laugh at, you know, like early Chaplin movies and Harold Lloyd movies and things like that. And they have that element, you know, certainly at work. Let's not forget that this is only a few years after sound gets introduced. They probably have one of the earliest sound movies with the Coconuts. Actually, it's got to be one of the first ones. Not the first, but certainly one of the first ones. And so they still have a lot of that visual sort of soundless humor, including, and we'll talk about it more in detail, I think, later, but that the most famous sequence in the movie is the mirror sequence, which is entirely soundless. Like that part of the movie, the sound noticeably just all drops out. It's always been noticeable to me how that happens. Yeah. But you were saying as well that you think that there are some people who dislike Duck Soup because it doesn't have those moments in it, or because it is just wall-to-wall jokes all the way through.
Yeah, I've heard some people say that because it doesn't have that kind of padding. There's no breathing room, I guess. Some people, I think, like the breathing room. Like, I certainly like the musical. Like, I should clarify. I don't love the musical numbers in the Marx Brothers films, but I do really like the Chico and Harpo musical moments. And I think those are great moments to breathe, and I think that's great. I don't think it's necessary, but I know that some people do feel that. I guess maybe it just comes down to people who care about plot, maybe.
Yeah.
And some people find that plot is really necessary to hang on. And the older that I've gotten, I think I talked about this even last time I was on. The vibe of something, or just the feeling you have while you're watching it, is almost more important to me than following any real narrative.
Yeah, I think that even like great dramas can get by without much of a plot. Like I would say that, I don't know, a Tarkovsky movie is like that, or Robert Altman's movies are like that. Terrence Malick's movies, like Days of Heaven, I can't really. I mean, that's not really a plot movie, I don't think, for the most part. I mean, there's
it's like a one-line plot, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But they're phenomenal movies, and this movie I think would it's a comedy, but it works the same way. It doesn't really depend on those plots. But I'm with you with also the Harpo and Chico music sequences, because they're just impressive. They're such impressive musicians. Do you you might have studied a bit more of the Marx Brothers than I have. Do you know much about their beginnings?
Yeah, a little bit. Just based on like I need to do a bit more reading, but yeah, I know that
they are brothers, right?
Yeah, they're all brothers. That part's true. It's not just a stage thing.
Okay.
But Groucho seems to be the one that had the calling to the stage more than anybody else. I don't think anybody else was really interested in that part. Chico, I know they wanted. I know he got piano lessons,
right?
And then I think his. I've heard some places that it was his job to teach the others piano, but I know that he was the main one that was learning that, and apparently that he was just an adequate player, but a fast player. It was, I think, what Groucho said in his book, one of his books. And then Harpo.
Really? Is that your estimation from watching it? I think he seems like I mean, maybe he couldn't be like a classical pianist or something, but he seems like.
I think he's fantastic, but I'm not qualified to say.
Yeah, I'm not either. But like, and partly it's the showmanship. Like he does that, like that when he does that, with his
He shoots the keys. Yeah,
he shoots the keys. Yeah, that is. I'm always impressed by that. Like that's.
No, I love it, and that brings me so much joy.
Yeah.
Harpo, I know, was like a self-taught musician for the most part. I believe he found a harp, his grandfather's harp, in the closet, and just started playing it. Which we were texting back and forth a bit leading up to this, and I think I alluded to when the harp went missing one day. They knew that it would be at the pawn shop because Chico had probably sold it to pay off a gambling debt. And this was even when he was a young teen, that he was like already spending time at the pool halls. So I know that those two kind of learned how to play music at home, and Groucho, I think, was more of a singer, and then just got into doing like small vaudeville traveling things when he was young. Got stranded in a bunch of places just because their money ran out, or whoever the main guy was bailed. But eventually he kind of got big enough, and their mom, Minnie, I think, decided that, I can make more money. Basically, that the way it worked is that if you have two people, you make twice the money. If you have three people, you make three times. So she arranged for like a variety show for the whole family.
Right.
And I guess Gummo was involved at one point.
Yeah.
And Gummo's role was eventually taken over by Zeppo.
Yeah. Because Zeppo is, I guess, significantly younger than the other four, right? He's 10 years younger than Groucho, I think. And Groucho's the third, right? It goes Chico, Harpo, Groucho, Gummo, Zeppo. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Gummo, who apparently purportedly despised being on stage. He did not like that at all. And eventually he left and then was replaced by Zeppo.
Yeah, who I'm not sure if Zeppo loved it that much either, but some people say
hard to tell. He seems like he loves being in that in those movies.
Some people say it's because he didn't like. I think by the time Duck Soup came out, it was already well known that he didn't have much to do in these movies. So I think he was either sick of the criticism, or he actually. I'm not sure if that was just because he didn't like doing the stuff in the movies or not.
Right.
But this would prove to be his last one, Duck Soup.
Yeah, but I wonder, like, why didn't like it's partly I feel like not entirely Zeppo's fault. Like I don't know why they didn't. He just like you've got so again, for those who don't know the Marx Brothers at all, you've got Chico who's doing this kind of mock Italian sort of character who's, you know, consistently speaking in like puns. You
Yeah.
have Harpo, who's kind of clownish. He got kind of a clownish look and doesn't speak at all, and you know, has the horn and chases after girls and things like that. You have Groucho, who's kind of the main person, I would say, with the mustache and with the quips and the witticisms and things like that. But also looks ridiculous with the fake mustache and the glasses. And then Zeppo's just got a suit. Like
Yeah,
that's all.
Zeppo's. I heard someone talking about this, and I kind of agree. There's not much you can give to Zeppo when you've got these three other super strong characters. You know, like
Yeah.
how much room would there have even been for Zeppo if they had tried to give him something to do? Like even just filling in a very basic role in these movies is sometimes seems forced. You know, just because it seems like he's just taking away screen time from the others.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I remember when I first started watching these movies, and I couldn't distinguish sometimes between who was like the romantic male lead in that sort of subplot story and who was Zeppo. Like I thought, oh, one of these has got to be like it was
Yeah.
Animal Crackers in particular. I was like, which one is Zeppo? Is it the guy
Right.
who's in the relationship, or is it this other guy?
Right.
So yeah, he's. But I do want to say, like, we should show our stuff now.
Oh yeah.
This is my collection of Marx Brothers movies. It's the first 5. So and there's Daniel's version of it right there's Zeppo right there. Yeah. You could tell he's the only one that looks ordinary out of the 4.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, and but also apparently looks like exactly like Groucho if he puts the same makeup on.
They all kind of do, right?
Yeah,
Like,
they do.
which again will take us back. We'll get there with the mirror scene.
With the
But
mirror
apparently,
scene.
they say that Zeppo was because they all had to switch roles, I guess, when they were on vaudeville, is the old story. So they always had to. They would all understudy each other. So sometimes Zeppo would play the Groucho role, sometimes the Harpo role. A very common story, I guess, is that when Groucho was sick, Zeppo filled in and got such a good response that Groucho was terrified that his ego was so shattered, and he got better immediately so he could play the next night.
Which seems so bizarre when you think of
it. Doesn't make sense. I don't buy
it. You don't think that happened? Okay. That would restore some sanity to the story, I think, if it wasn't true. So these are what we just showed were the first 5. Daniel's got a more up-to-date version than I have, but the first 5 are were done with Paramount, and the first 2 of those 5 were direct from their stage shows, Coconuts and Animal Crackers, and then I think the next 3 were written specifically for the screen, including Duck Soup.
Yeah, that's right. And I think they do have remnants of stage shows throughout them, like
right.
But I believe that they all have credited writers. You know what I mean? Like I don't think the Marx Brothers are really credited. I'm actually not even sure if they're credited with writing the first 2.
No.
But I know that they all have writers attached to them, which is interesting. You know what I mean? Because if they put together these routines on Broadway or in vaudeville themselves, to suddenly be attached to writers. I know Groucho appreciated it because he's always speaking so highly of the writers of their films.
Well, and some of them are pretty well known. Like I think it was the guy who co-wrote Animal Crackers. I could be wrong, or maybe Horse Feathers. Anyway, S.J. Perlman, who wrote one of them, co-wrote one of them, one of the early ones, not Duck Soup, but one of the early ones, was a very, very highly regarded writer for the New Yorker. Wrote and in many ways kind of is one of those writers that has set the standard for comedy, like prose writing. So anytime you like go read a New Yorker comedy like humor story, he's kind of the one that started all that. So there is that, but also actually just for a moment, they've got a lot of big names associated with their work. Not the least of which is the guy who directed this movie, Leo McCarey.
Right.
Have you seen many other McCarey movies?
I can't say I have, and I haven't seen the big one, which I guess is Make Way for Tomorrow, is one of his more beloved. I've probably seen An Affair to Remember at some point. I think I've seen The Awful Truth. but I don't remember it very well. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, he's got a lot of comic history though, like even leading up to this,
Right.
with Laurel and Hardy as well, I believe.
Yes, that's
Not
right.
that I'm not terribly familiar with them, to be honest, but
No, me neither. Me neither.
I from all from all I've heard, he didn't really want to do this movie.
Yeah, well, I guess for one, the Marx Brothers were notoriously difficult to work with.
Right.
So I think that was part of it. But were there other reasons that that he didn't want to do it?
No, I don't know the reasons. I think it's probably that. He probably thought it would just be a real pain in the neck. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, you can imagine if you have these characters, it would be enough to kind of work with one of them to be a problem. But when they're all kind of constantly standing up for each other, I would imagine it would be difficult.
Can I let me just say one thing about what it must have been like to work with them. I read this one story, and it was probably in Groucho's book that I read. Here, I'll just show quickly because I'm going to refer to it probably, but it's a popular book. It's probably his first one, Groucho and Me. So that's one that I read, and it's a good read. But he refers to a moment when he wanted to buy stocks. He got a hot stock tip, and this was before he lost all his money in the crash. Which is why I guess they went to Hollywood. One of the reasons they went to Hollywood is because they had lost all their money.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, or had at least encouraged it, I think.
Right.
But so there was an intermission, and he had to get somewhere to. Am I getting this wrong? It could have been for something else. I think it was a stock tip, and he left the theater.
Yeah.
He left the theater and didn't get back in time, or didn't get He left the theater during intermission and was going to be late for his curtain call.
Right.
And that's just an idea of how
professional.
Yeah, how professional he might have been.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I mean, you kind of get the feeling that they're going to be guys that really don't take this stuff all that seriously. I mean, they're not in it because they're very serious about the craft or anything like that. Although I think they probably took quite seriously comedy, but I don't know how serious they took, making movies or anything like that.
Right.
But yeah, so there was those movies, the first 5 Paramount movies, which to me is like the golden age Marx Brothers movies. And then you have the MGM movies that they do right after that.
Yeah, so that's this set here, which which kind of takes you through Night at the Opera, Day at the Races, and then a few kind of lesser ones like At the Circus, Room Service, Go West, Big Store, and Night at Casablanca, which was supposed to be kind of a return to form, but they look pretty old. They're getting up there at that point. I think, but by most accounts, the Night at the Opera and Day at the Races are the only 2 real ones of note. I can't really speak. I haven't seen them in a while. I saw Day at the Races a few years ago, and I thought it was enjoyable enough that I was glad I'd watched it. And all the other ones I think are pretty good, just for a scene here or there. But you were saying you still think pretty highly of Night at the Opera.
Yeah, it's definitely different. It's a different kind of movie, and just as Duck Soup is very thin on plot, it's a joke machine kind of movie. A Night at the Opera has more of a plot to it, but I would say at least in A Night at the Opera that the plot is a bit more well done than, like, again, with those early movies like Animal Crackers, which I would also say is a fantastic, like, really funny movie. The non-Marx Brothers play, it almost seems like there's 2 different movies going on at the same time, and sometimes they'll cut to the Marx Brothers and sometimes they'll cut to this other story that's happening. But and as you say, with Duck Soup, that's almost all removed and it's almost all Marx Brothers all the way through, which is great. Night at the Opera, it's a bit more interweaved, so it kind of, to me, kind of is a bit more smooth. So it's, at least to me, it's not as good as Duck Soup because it's just not as funny, but it's still funny and it still kind of works as a movie to me. But the Day at the Races, which is the only other one I've seen from that post Paramount time, to me just didn't hang together quite as well. There are just too many moments where I just wasn't amused. But there's a lot of moments in it that are still funny.
That one's also long. It's like almost 2 hours long, A Day at the Races, which is
Yeah.
pretty long for this kind of movie.
Yeah.
But I also know that these are the most successful movies they made,
Yeah.
which is interesting. When they switched to MGM basically Irving Thalberg, I think it is,
Yeah.
who was he had figured out he was like so confident. He's like, I'm gonna make you so much money. And they left Paramount because they weren't getting the share of the profits that they wanted.
Right.
And so when they went to MGM, I guess it was just more of a shift into more traditional Hollywood filmmaking, I think. And I guess having the stuff before was maybe a little bit too crazy for the mass audiences, but putting the Marx Brothers in something that's a bit more palatable, I guess, was something that a wider audience responded well to.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that, because this is another conversation that we were having just before the show started. You know, my feeling is that I think a movie could still be great if it's just jokes all the way through. And the example that I gave, which actually is a movie that I don't like as much as Duck Soup, I don't think I would necessarily put it in my top movies, but I still think it's a very funny movie. It was a movie like The Naked Gun, which is just wall to wall jokes, right? There's nothing in it. There's no moment in it where it's like, okay, it's serious now. There's never a moment like that. And you know, Airplane is in that vein, and you know, other movies like the Life of Brian, Holy Grail, movies like that are in that vein too, I think.
Yeah.
I love those kinds of movies. Like, I think that's almost the ultimate form of comedy. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think those are terrific movies, and it's interesting which ones get respect, like, because the things you've mentioned, the Marx Brothers, like, I guess there's a difference. For some reason, the spoof movies are considered kind of more lowbrow, I guess. I'm not sure why that is. The humor comes from a similar place, but I guess having a reference point makes it seem easier for people. I don't know.
Right.
But obviously, Monty Python and the Marx Brothers, they definitely share a kind of disrespect of authority, I think, that people respond to. So there's something a bit more subversive about their work, probably. Which is great. And but I do love those spoofs, like Top Secret is a spoof I love. And I was just talking about Airplane with someone today, and on a podcast I was listening to about this movie, they cross-referenced the court sequence with the court sequence in Airplane Part 2, which I haven't actually seen, but it sounds hilarious, this moment.
I've seen Airplane 2, but I can't remember.
But yeah, there's I guess for comedy to be considered, I don't know, comedy is a hard thing to get for people to really consider great, which is interesting. And if it doesn't have some kind of social critique or some kind of social value, if it is just laughs, it seems like it falls by the wayside a little bit. Like Blazing Saddles or Young Frankenstein, everybody acknowledges that those are great, but I wonder if that's just because they're classics now. Like, I don't know if anybody would say that they are. Well, some people would say that Blazing Saddles would be groundbreaking, I guess. But and maybe because they are the first of the kind of parodies. But I don't know. I don't think anybody would ever consider them. No one would consider them high art, I don't think.
I also think it's interesting that Blazing Saddles, which I also think is a great movie, but Blazing Saddles is still kind of a revered movie amongst a community of people who, it seems to me, have never watched a Western. And I don't know why that is. Like, it seems to me that you have to at least have some kind of an understanding of the genre before you kind of realize what that movie is doing. Like, I think it is doing some pretty far out things, but I think that it doesn't really work if you don't know the genre that it's spoofing.
Yeah, I would agree. Same with Young Frankenstein. Like,
Same with Young Frankenstein.
Yeah. Or all of his movies, really, up to a point.
Pretty much.
but yeah, these movies are just funny, and I think like there aren't really a lot of movies that are just joke, 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 joke.
Yeah.
And I guess, as we were saying, like even the Marx Brothers films sometimes don't fit that because they do kind of maybe do too much plot from time to time,
Yeah.
or something to pad out the jokes. But but yeah, they don't really make movies like that anymore. I guess the spoofs are the only thing. And
Hmm.
some people would say like Sacha Baron Cohen, I guess would be some
Mm.
people suggest that he's kind of in the same vein. But in terms of like legacy of the Marx Brothers or something like that, like I think that yeah, the spoofs and obviously like Looney Tunes and like I think of the Muppets and I think of like Pee Wee Herman like as
Right.
being in the same vein. And I think those are interesting because they managed to capture all the chaos and capture all the anarchy and still capture all the lighter side. I think it's because it's not mean spirited as well that it kind of works for the Marx Brothers too, which is
Yeah.
good. Like the characters might be mean spirited, but the movie isn't.
Yeah, I think that that's true. I think that,
Mhm.
that's absolutely true. Now,
Mhm.
do you think the word you used the word subversive before, and
Mhm.
do you think that quite apart from, and we will talk about sort of the last 10 minutes of the movie, which does engage with this with this country at war, but
Mhm.
beyond, but forget, imagine that part isn't there. Do you think that just merely being like these kind of chaotic figures whose role is to undercut seriousness at any corner, because that's a big part of their shtick, is that everybody around them takes everything seriously,
Right.
and they don't, and so they
Mhm.
are this kind of disruptive force. Do you think it's subversive in that respect too? That it's and Chaplin does that as well, right? Everybody around him is serious,
Mhm.
and he makes they're ridiculous, but he kind of makes their seriousness look ridiculous as well. And I wonder if there's a value to that I think that is important.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's it. I think they're just basically anti rules and anti like but especially when it comes to stiff upper lip, like high society, bourgeois society, like I
Yeah,
think that they have no respect for that. They have no because I guess that's not what they had. Like they
yeah,
didn't grow up with money, and it probably seems ridiculous to them. You know what I mean? Like when you're running around trying to make pennies or whatever, it probably seems ridiculous that someone would care what kind of gown you to put on, or I don't know,
yeah,
or politics. Like it probably none of it I don't think mattered to them. So I think it is funny though that they will drive people to the point of madness and that like it and like at that point, of course, I would take it pretty seriously if they threw my hat in the fire, probably.
right.
Like but it doesn't really mean anything. And I think they're just trying to shine, maybe they're not trying to shine a light on anything. I think they're just trying to be funny.
Yeah,
But I think that, but it is subversive, just like upending the rules that everybody holds so dear,
yeah,
and showing how ridiculous these things that we care about are. Like, yeah,
yeah.
it's great.
And like even when Rufus T. Firefly Groucho gets upset by being called an upstart and then
Yes,
slaps
yes,
Trentino, it's like you could you could tell that he doesn't really care. Like there's no part of this where where he should care at all. Like
yeah,
and that he's just doing it as a kind of a bit. So even though he seems to be the one that gets upset in that moment, he's really just kind of sending up like a scene where these two kind of guys will just bring themselves to the brink of fighting a duel on the basis of some stupid social decorum being broken. um
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, so it's so the now so let's talk maybe a little bit about other. I just want to talk about some favorite moments that you might have from the movie.
Sure.
So you like the lemonade sequence, which is obviously a great
Yes.
moment.
Yes.
What else do you think of when you think about Duck Soup?
Um, I think of um, I think of Chico on the in court, and I think that that's probably some of the best use of bad puns I've ever seen. I love the whole setup of it is great. So Chico or Ciccolini, as he is in the movie, I guess,
Yeah.
is basically gone. He's on trial for treason, I think, for trying to steal the war plans.
Yeah.
Because this is, I guess, at the point where Fredonia and Slovenia, I guess, are going to war at this point. I think, or they're about to.
Yeah.
Or they might go to war at this point. I don't recall.
Yeah, there's still a good possibility that they'll go to war because Groucho has slapped Trentino yet again when he says, "What was the word you called me?" And he said, "Upstart," and he slaps him again. Yeah.
Right. So he's on trial because Trentino tried to get him to steal their potential war plans, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess Firefly is defending him. Or no, he's prosecuting. I don't remember, but he ends up kind of defending him a little bit.
Yeah.
The sides in the film are very hard to gauge, like whose side Chico everybody's on. But he's like, look at Ciccolini, he's abject, this abject thing or something, and he's like, and Ciccolini goes, I object. You know what I mean? And then there's another part where he's like saying. So he says irrelevant, or someone says irrelevant, and he says elephant, and someone says dollars and taxes, and you say, yeah, that's where my uncle lives, Dallas, Texas. And it's like, and the part that's great about this is that he knows, like the character knows that these are bad jokes. Like these aren't just literally bad jokes that were written as bad jokes that might have been funny at the time. And I think that's why it still works now, because Chico, like, he'll say Dallas, Texas, and they go, and he'll be laughing at somebody, and everybody else kind of groans. Like the movie acknowledges that these aren't brilliant jokes, and I just think that's one of the strongest moments for me. And Chico is someone who has grown in my estimation as I've gotten older. You start as Harpo fan, and then as I get older, I appreciate just the wordplay of Chico and how he's kind of the perfect foil and keeps things moving. So that's why I love that scene.
Yeah. I think Chico is great. Like, I guess I'll always be partial to Groucho just because I don't know. I have a hard time thinking of somebody who I would like more than him in terms of the movies. But you wouldn't want to do a disservice to either Harpo or Chico. Obviously, Harpo, a great sort of a physical comedian, but Chico is also fantastic too, and shouldn't be kind of underrated or underappreciated in terms of his contribution to the Marx Brothers.
What stands out for you? Is there anything that stands out for you?
Well, I certainly like the first bit where Groucho is doing has been introduced, and he's doing his whole routine around the whole court. And that's where you get, there's a few scenes like that in a couple of Marx Brothers movies where he gets introduced and kind of just goes out and says a whole bunch of kind of one-liners and things like that. Like Animal Crackers, that's where you get the I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How it got into my pajamas, I'll never know. But I can't remember what the big line is in Duck Soup, but he has several of those there as well, and mostly at the expense of and we should talk about her for a second, actually.
Margaret Dumont?
Yeah, mostly at the expense of Margaret Dumont, who is also very good in these movies. Like so I just discovered this through researching for Duck Soup, because I always bought into the line that the Marx Brothers used to have, that she didn't understand what was going on while they were making the movies, that she was just as in the dark. But in fact, she did know what was going on.
Yeah, I've heard it both ways. Yeah, I've heard it both ways. I think from Groucho himself, actually. I think that he's the one who kind of started that, but I think he's also the one who said that. Of course, she knew what was going on, or something, or that she was like the fifth Marx brother, essentially. And and she's fantastic. Like, it's interesting how her character changes throughout the movies too. Like, she goes from someone who tolerates Groucho to somebody who is fully behind him, and you don't really know why her character is behind Firefly at all. I guess she's in love with him, but the way he treats her is just terrific. It's awful and hilarious, but she's able to just brush it off her shoulder, and
Yeah.
she's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it is true. Like he definitely takes these shots at her that are that can be pretty demeaning, but at the same time, it's like it is this sort of weird back and forth between between that and like, you know, uh can't you see that I love you and things like that, like all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So there's that, but she is great just in terms of her overall reaction, and the movies would not be the same without a character like that. Like she's really kind of crucial to these stories.
No, you need that. You need that high society person who's going to be slightly shocked or bewildered by what they're doing. Nobody
Yeah.
else really is, although Trentino, I guess, is. But she's the only woman character that kind of plays that role. Every
Yeah.
other woman that's in the movie is kind of like someone to be chased by Harpo, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's a pretty strong character, and she has agency as well in these movies, because she's kind of usually like she's the reason that he is been appointed to the, is it president? I guess it's
Yeah.
president. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah, because she
Fredonia.
has the money, and she will only give her money as long as Rufus T. Firefly is president.
Yeah.
There's a
So,
backstory you want to hear some more about.
yeah, and I guess her husband either used to be the president or gave her the money. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, but no, she's great. She's a great foil. She's great to bounce for them to bounce off. But there is a lot of jokes at her expense, and I understand a lot of the jokes probably cut close to home too, just based on her personal life. But I don't know much about that. I know that I believe her husband actually had recently passed away. I believe
Really?
that there's jokes about her wearing a wig in. There are jokes about her wearing a wig in the movie. I believe like it was well known that she actually did wear a wig. Like, so I don't know how. Anyway.
Well, that's too bad. That's unfortunate. But
it is, unless she was okay with it. But
unless
I don't
she was
know.
okay with it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The joke is, can I have a lock of your hair? And
Right.
she says, a lock of my hair. He's like, at least I didn't ask for the whole wig.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, so there is that part. And I think the next scene, I guess, or pretty quickly thereafter, the one with Trentino meeting with Ciccolini and Pinky, the one that Harpo plays, that is pretty good, because there's a lot of kind of quick fire jokes in that section too that are pretty good. But I think, again, like it's the part that I laugh at the most, which is funny because I laugh at it every single time, is that mirror scene. And it's kind of, I wouldn't expect to laugh at it as much as I do because it's so iconic. You've seen it so many places. It's funny just for how many things they try in that sequence.
Yeah.
So again, if you haven't seen the movie, this is when Chico and Harpo have snuck into the house to steal the war plans. Groucho is there, and he goes down to check to see what's happening. Harpo somehow has managed to crash into a mirror, and there's a room on the other side of that mirror.
It doesn't. Yeah, the setup makes no sense. Yeah.
there's no sense to the setup at all. But so there's a room on the other side of this mirror, and so now Groucho thinks he's looking into a mirror, but it's Harpo on the other side, and so he thinks that he's looking at himself.
Mm-hmm.
But
because Harpo has put on makeup to deceive other people into thinking that he's that character. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And also, it's sort of incidental to that is that Chico has also done the same thing. He's looking elsewhere in the house. He's also looking like Groucho at the same time.
Yes.
But I don't want to. It's not going to be funny if I just kind of explain what happens really from that point forward. But if I do highly and actually, but it is funnier, I think, in the context. Like you have to see everything leading up to that moment. So if you just YouTube the mirror scene, I don't think it's going to be as good as if you watch the whole movie up until that point. Mm-hmm. But I think like when he drops the hat and Harpo picks it up for him. And he's like, thank you. Like he doesn't say it, but he's like, thank you. And then they're nodding. like that is great because it's like at that point, it's the game is definitely up, but they're still going through with it. Like that part I find really funny, and of course the funniest part when they do the full 360.
Yeah, yeah, the 360 is the best. Yeah,
Yeah,
that whole scene, that whole home invasion scene, we'll say,
yeah,
is
funniest home
really,
invasion ever.
yeah, it's so tightly edited too. It's so amazing, and like we've already talked about the edit, like how quick this movie is, and how it's got so much stuff missing that would be in their other films in terms of unnecessary, or not unnecessary, but other scenes, more plot-based scenes. But that sequence is so well edited and timed, and I think that that's also something that's been missing from the previous films, which are slightly more closer to stage productions, I guess. But that sequence, like they're cutting from room to room to room with three different Grouchos, like three different characters, and it really is almost suspenseful as well, in addition to comedy, which
Yeah,
the suspense adds to the comedy. But like you get a cutaway of Groucho's face when he's trying to trick his reflection. Then they show them both doing it, and he's like, "Huh, what do I got to do here?" And there's like
right.
one part where Groucho walks into Margaret Dumont's character has asked one of the other characters for a glass of water, thinking it's Groucho, and he leaves. And then Groucho walks in, and she's like, "What about my glass of water?" He's like, "What about your glass of water?" And then it's just a really quick cut, and that's not something you can do on the stage. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yes.
the cut is immediately after that joke, and it cuts to Harpo and Chico somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the mark of a good director or just the advancing style, but that whole sequence is really well edited, which is why I would agree. You can't just watch the mirror, the few minutes of the mirror, all just by itself, because you need to get that into that vibe. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, partly I wonder if like, I do watch. I love a lot of movies from this time period. There are a lot that I like, but it is also true that I think they hadn't quite figured out. A lot of people hadn't quite figured out proper narrative structure yet. Some people had mastered it. Like Chaplin, I think had mastered it at this point. But even like I'll watch like a German expressionist. You know what I watched about a year ago was Fritz Lang's Dr. Mabuse.
Oh,
Have you
like
seen?
the is it the 4 or 5 hour one?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I've seen that. Yeah,
yeah, that could use a little bit of editing. I think that could
yeah,
be. I mean, maybe, who am I? Who am I to critique the great Fritz Lang? I don't know,
yeah.
but I think that movie. I could have gone
I
without a
watched
few.
I, I watched that one in a few installments.
Me too.
I was okay with it. To be honest, I got bored during the action scene in the last hour. I think more than anything,
Yeah,
but but yeah, I
yeah,
hear you. And even
yeah,
like even their films, I feel like they were just getting the hang of it. Like
yeah,
you mentioned Coconuts being one of the first early sound films, and you can tell like the
yeah,
sound, you can't even hear them sometimes very well. So it is early,
yeah.
and the narrative stuff for sure, which is just so funny to think that they were getting better at narrative, and then they just cut out the entire narrative for this what feels almost like a clip show, but the best clip show ever. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, clip show, I think that's a good way of putting it because, like, again, like that explains that would be a good explanation for the sequence with the lemonade stand guy. I mean, that
Mhm.
that's serves that purpose. That they're. I guess the thing is the best message to give to people who haven't watched it is if don't go into this looking for a story. Go into it
Yeah.
looking for a series of great
Yeah.
jokes,
Yeah.
um, and visual gags and things like that.
Mhm.
The other great visual gag, that him my car, and then gets into to his
Yeah.
car, and it's Harpo, and Harpo almost always drives away without him. So
Yeah.
that's a great sequence too. Now, famously, you have, I think, probably what's talked about the most with this movie is maybe that sort of last 10 minutes where they do end up going to war.
Mhm.
And so you have this, actually, in my opinion, it's quite cinematic, that last 10 minutes of the movie, where they're in that sort of bunker or whatever, that home, fighting the war. And you've got Groucho in a series of different war uniforms, a Civil War uniform, a World War I uniform. What else?
He gets one of the. At one point, he's got like the Beefeater hat.
Yeah,
the British, and at one point he's got the coonskin cap, like
Davy Crockett.
Crockett. But yeah, every time you see him, he's got a new costume.
Yeah, which again is great. Like that to me, that is a precursor to an airplane or a Naked Gun kind of thing.
Yeah,
when every time you see him, he's wearing a different outfit. So it's it's been debated about whether this movie is making an anti-war statement. I don't think there's a firm conclusion about it. But what do you think from what you've take away?
Yeah, I think that like Groucho's gone on record, I guess, saying that they were just trying to be funny. That like I think the exact quote is, "What are you talking about? We were just trying to be funny." But right. I think it's also fair to say that he's not the most reliable, probably, source. And I don't know if I haven't heard anything from the writers about what they thought their intention was when they wrote it. I think that if you're anti-authority and you're kind of anti the powers that be, then it's not too far of a stretch to suggest that you're anti-politics and anti-where politics lead, which is often to fighting out your problems.
Yeah,
I think that they would probably they do acknowledge in the film, like, they're basically making fun of, like, the whole sequence of we're going to war, we're finally going to war, is laughable. Like, they're singing about going to fight people, and I think if you find that funny, you obviously think war is ridiculous,
right?
So yeah, whether or not it's meant to be a big statement, I don't know, but I think that it's not an anti-war film in the same way that, like, some of the more serious war films are, like
right.
Platoon.
Right. This is no come and see.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm sure that they would say that they think war is ridiculous and a silly way to solve problems. Like, even the combat scene itself is full of ridiculous moments. So
yeah,
and they end up just pelting the guy with fruit.
Yeah, that's right. So, that's how they win.
Yeah,
they stick his head in the door and pelt it with fruit.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Harpo, when they were making the movie, like, had just been to Europe and, like, was pretty moved because I guess Hitler had just come to power just before. And so I know that he'd seen some of the effects of that, and I know that he was pretty upset about it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I haven't read anywhere that I think he said he had a pretty miserable experience on Duck Soup because that's what was going on in the world at the time. So I don't know. I also don't know how much Harpo or Chico really had to do with the plots of these movies. You know what I mean? I think Groucho was probably more involved with the writing or the writers, but I just don't see how it couldn't be some kind of critique. Whether or not it was a major decision, we're going to make an anti-war film, I don't think they would say that, but they would probably say that war is ridiculous, and that's what they were trying to show.
Yeah, and I would also say that even regardless of intention, like, that the movie does two things. Like, it shows, for one, that people will go to war for very frivolous reasons.
Yes.
So that's one thing. Like, it takes almost nothing to set these two countries at war, and it's over the most ridiculous reasons, right? So if you think about it in, like, actual sort of realistic terms, and of course the movie doesn't give us anything to justify such a reading, but nevertheless, if you did think of it in those terms, imagine you're actually fighting for Fredonia, and you find out that the reason why you're fighting is because some guy called your leader an upstart and he slapped him in the face with a glove.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But wars have been fought over things like that, I'm sure, so it's not like it's completely out of bounds. But so again, it's calling attention to the utter absurdity at the heart of war. But also it shows us how easily people can be whipped up into supporting the idea of going to war, which is something that in the wars that I've witnessed from a safe distance in my lifetime, it's always amazing to me how easily people do get kind of swept up in it, and how if somebody say offers an argument like, maybe why don't we like come up with some sort of potentially diplomatic solution, or try and find the most peaceful ways of resolving this, there's always some kind of justification of no, that's not going to work. War, we need to go to war. And that's in many ways what this movie is showing us when they go into that song. Like, they're just so whipped up into this frenzy of, we're going to war, and isn't this great? And and regardless of if it was all for laughs or not, the fact that they are showing us that is pretty significant, I think.
Yeah. And what you said reminded me, like the ego of it, and the whipping yourself into a frenzy. Even Firefly like whips himself into a frenzy just in one of the funniest scenes. Like, that's probably my another favorite scene, is where Groucho is like, he has a hypothetical conversation with Trentino.
Yes.
Like the Miss Teasdale, the Dumont character, is like, okay, he's going to give you one more chance to apologize. And so right before Trentino comes in, he's like, sure, I'll apologize. But what if he doesn't accept my apology? Imagine that. He doesn't accept my apology. I go down on my knees and I give him an apology. And then by the time Trentino shows up, he's in such a tizzy. They just slaps the guy in the face. And that's all there is to it. So whipping yourself into that. Anyway, I just think that it's ridiculous how, it's hilarious. They're so funny. Yeah.
And then once you get to that stage, it's hard to get yourself back. Like, it's hard to get yourself out of it. So in just a matter of minutes, they're actually at war, and they're actually fighting. And another line that again is just so, I mean, it's appalling when you think of it, but like, again, it's purposefully so, when they are fighting in that house, and Groucho just in shooting just throws his gun and throws his rifle out the window by accident, but he literally just throws it out. And he's like, oh, my rifle went out the window, and he turns to Marilyn Dumont's like, be a good girl and go out and get it.
Be a good girl.
That's another line that always makes me laugh, I have to say.
Groucho has some great stuff in there too, for sure.
Yeah.
Groucho's like the great mix of all of them, kind of, right? Like, he's the like Chico and Harpo both kind of, when you put them together, they make Groucho, kind of, which is interesting. But he definitely is the glue that holds it together. You can't have it without him.
Yeah.
They're kind of like I like how they each have an advantage, though. Like, the way the dynamics work is so interesting. Like, I've been thinking about it as like they're like rock, paper, scissors almost. It's like Groucho has the advantage over society, basically.
Right.
Harpo can always get the best of Groucho. Chico can also get the best of Groucho, but Chico can also is in charge of Harpo. There's kind of this weird like circle of power between them, where I just think it's great. And that's also why I guess it's almost like a Three Stooges kind of dynamic, where one's kind of in charge and one's kind of in the middle and one's at the bottom. But Mo is always kind of the boss of them. No one can beat Mo, I guess. That's the only difference there.
Yeah.
I'm not a big
in real life. In real life, were they actually Stooges? Anyway, so
Stooges, yeah.
Actually, not only were they not real Stooges in real life, there weren't even three of them. There was, I think, what was there, 5 Stooges?
It's like a half dozen, yeah.
Which the Chico having power over Harpo thing just reminded me of the other great joke, where again, it's in that second scene that I was telling you about, where Trentino is meeting them for I don't know if he's meeting them for the first time, but it's the first time that we're seeing them together. And he's like, we received this letter, and then Harpo reads it, and he's like, and then he's like, what is it? And she goes like, he's upset because he can't read.
Yeah.
So now the other question that I wanted to ask is, and we've kind of talked about it a little bit when we talked about the puns, but I think a big thing that people think about is that comedy, or it's maybe a cliche or a truism, one of the two. If it's not true, it's a cliche, I suppose. But that comedy is something that's very much of its time, and that comedy tends to not age well, not necessarily because it has offensive things in it, just because it's very much of its particular time, that people find different things funny in their time. Mm-hmm. Now, I've always resisted that because I like so much comedy that's not of my own time. I like comedy of my own time, but I like a lot from other times too. Like I like the Marx Brothers Duck Soup, for example, and Chaplin movies and things like that. So I don't know. What do you and my instinct is to say that, and I have watched Duck Soup in a theater before. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember it getting a ton of laughs all the way through. And this is with an audience who, is going to see the movie, like they've purposely gone to see Duck Soup. So I wonder, does this movie, is it a hard sell in today's world, do you think?
That's difficult. I would argue that anything that's black and white is a hard sell, to be honest. But especially anything that is this old, like it's like almost 100 years old. People, I think, have an automatic aversion to that. The general moviegoer, I guess. If we're just talking about the jokes, though, I can't imagine. I'm going to say this and then I'm going to qualify it, but I can't imagine anybody not thinking that Harpo is funny, even today.
Isn't funny, you mean?
Yeah. I can't imagine anybody thinking he isn't funny.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't imagine showing Harpo to my son right now, and him not finding it hilarious.
Yeah.
Now, there's certain things about Harpo that probably are, obviously reprehensible, and today would be maybe not fit in a modern film.
Right.
So I guess it comes down to the puns, you know what I mean? And it comes down to the wordplay. And the wordplay is pretty old fashioned. It's certain, and a lot of the things that are being said are, maybe people wouldn't get it. There aren't a lot of movies that are based around that kind of wordplay anymore. It is kind of an old fashioned style.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but they'd be called dad jokes, I guess, and people still like dad jokes. It's not like.
But do they? That's my question. Is that's a good question, because I feel like when people say that's a dad joke, they use it. They're using it pejoratively.
But that's kind of what I was saying earlier about Chico. They know that they're bad jokes in the movie.
Yeah.
They know when they're writing it that it's bad, and they're playing on how bad the joke is, I think, to a point. So that's kind of what I think makes it a bit more timeless. And I think in terms of whether it is timeless or not, or whether it's evergreen, I guess, as comedians, a lot of comedians say they want their comedy to be evergreen, that you can watch it whenever. It's not hitched to any kind of current political, or it's not just references to, I don't know, Heidi Fleiss or something. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to be watching old early Jay Leno monologues. Thinking, oh, this is still funny because it's referencing something they've never heard of. So I think that this movie succeeds in that because it's not necessarily referencing anything that you need to know about to still find it funny. I know there are references in it because there are some. There's a few off-color jokes in it that are referencing things from the time, but the majority of the things in this film, I think you can still find funny whether or not you were around in 1933. Is it 33?
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was kind of wondering, is whether that perception that comedy is something that's of its time is really just a widely held assumption, because most of the things that the comedy that most people watch is topical. Like
Right.
people mostly watch things like Saturday Night Live or things like The Daily Show or things like that, or I don't know if people still watch them as much as they used to, but like a late night talk show with the opening monologue and things like that.
Right.
That is often kind of to them sort of what standard comedy is. So yeah, obviously that stuff isn't going to age well. But I do think that I think what you're saying is absolutely right about Duck Soup, that and other movies, that but Duck Soup in particular, that it's not topical. There's nothing really, not much about it that is particularly topical. That it kind of transcends time in that sense.
Yeah, and if there is a political message in it, if any of the critique of upper society that's in there is certainly still valid today,
Yeah.
like maybe more so than ever.
Yeah.
So it's I think that there's a lot to hang on to, and yeah, it still works. Like the humor works on a few levels. It works on that kind of that, like we were saying, that comedy doesn't need to mean something. But
Yeah.
I think this film can work on both levels. It can be just funny, or if you want to use it as a look at it and say, look, they're making fun of these politicians, then I
Yeah.
think that works as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And now that we've proven that you can watch this movie now and still find it funny, let me just qualify it one more time and ask, do you think that you and I in particular are prepped to enjoy these movies because of the kind of environment that we grew up in? Because we are very much surrounded by a family who tells jokes like these, I think. And maybe that's, I don't know, but I'm not going to name people specifically on this channel right
Sure.
now. But I do know that there's. I feel like you've mentioned dad jokes, but I feel like I could name uncles that would have fit in with the Marx Brothers milieu a little bit,
Right.
and the kind of jokes.
Right. And I wonder if that's I wonder if that's the people, or if it's just the influence that the Marx Brothers would have had on the comedy that they watched.
Yeah.
Like because as we've said, you can trace this style of comedy throughout like the decades that followed it, like through Monty Python, probably through SNL, probably through all those things that certainly were big. So like the influence of the Marx Brothers, I would say certainly exists. I don't know if I would say it exists now. I can't think of too many things on television. Like I mentioned Sacha Baron Cohen, but I think
Yeah.
Sacha Baron Cohen is a little bit more, I don't want to be, I don't have too much to say about it, but I think he punches down a bit more. But
Yeah. And I think that he's much more. See, okay, I mean, maybe I'm gonna ruffle some horse feathers out there, but because I have friends who I really respect their tastes and their tasting, and we have very similar taste in comedy. Sacha Baron Cohen has never done it for me, and I wonder, and I do think maybe it's because I feel like I can see Sacha Baron Cohen's point too much when I'm watching his stuff. Like, and I don't really love his point often, but even aside from that, even if I liked it, I feel like to some degree it's almost a bit too transparent when I'm watching his stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't get that when I'm watching Duck Soup. Like with Duck Soup, I can just kind of just laugh at the material, and I can sort of just appreciate that kind of poking fun at people's sort of stuffiness. And the same with Monty Python as well. Which I guess I don't know. See, I guess there is a point to something like Life of Brian. But even Life of Brian, I guess the point is just be yourself, be an independent thinker. And that's really a more profound point than
yes, exactly. Like you could say that it's an anti-religion film, I suppose. But yeah, on its very basics, it's what you've just said. You know what I mean? It's not like it's an anti-religion film the same way that this is an anti-war film. You know what I mean? It's not like you don't need to watch it thinking about the politics of it. I don't think. I think you can
Yeah.
watch it and still enjoy it without having to without understanding those elements.
Yeah.
So
I don't mean to offend. You know, if people out there, look, you Sacha Baron Cohen fans out there, welcome. You're definitely.
You know
But
what?
he just doesn't do it for me. He just doesn't do it for me.
But yeah, I think he's funny. I laugh at his stuff.
Yeah.
Through Borat, at least. I didn't love Bruno, but I kind of have a bit of an issue. I don't want to take this too far, but I kind of have a bit of an issue with comedy that is catching people off guard. It
Right.
seems a little bit like cheating to me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I know that the people that are usually being interviewed by him don't stand behind great institutions, or they're not necessarily the best people in terms of
Right.
what they're associated with.
Right.
Usually pretty awful people in terms of what they get behind. But like that, or like the Daily Show, when the Daily Show goes to like rallies and stuff like that, like I think it's funny, but I also think that when you put a camera in someone's face, it's really easy to cheat the situation.
Right.
And so I have slightly less. I almost have sympathy for those people, but then again, I'll watch something like, oh my god, what's that show with? Sorry, the one where the guy helps businesses, small businesses. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where he did that thing called Dumb Starbucks. Do you know what I'm referring to?
I might. Hold on a second. Hold on.
Why can't I remember what it's called? It's
Nathan for You.
Yeah, Nathan for You. I really love that show, but
Okay.
I think that's slightly less. Like it does tease the people a little bit, but it just seems slightly less mean spirited to me for some reason. Whereas I feel like Sacha Baron Cohen really wants to make people look stupid.
Yeah.
And that's a bit, maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. Know. Yeah. Which again, like I'm okay with that when it's the Marx Brothers doing it, but but I think that the fact that it is all within this fictional world, I think does make a bit of a difference there.
And important. Yeah, and I'm fine for making Rudy Giuliani look ridiculous. I know that happened, but I just mean that style of comedy. I think there's something about that doesn't work for me. Maybe.
Yeah. I've never been able to put my finger on why he didn't work. He's definitely a very highly regarded comedian in our time, but he doesn't. I think I do think to some degree like 30 Rock for a while. The later years of that show was veering towards the kind of manic energy of a sort of Marx Brothers movie. I don't think it was quite as effective, but it was sort of moving in that area. But yeah, I don't know what else today is doing. Maybe some of the animated TV shows potentially.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
Yeah, the animated stuff. It's when things go a little bit surreal. It's like when things get a little bit heady, and I really appreciate that when things are let themselves just kind of wander off the. If the plot's here, they wander off a little bit just for a flight of fancy.
Yes.
And that doesn't happen very often these days.
No. Mm-hmm. And so actually. One last thing, because it does so along those lines, like it does seem like there are these kind of two different kinds of comedy. There is a kind of comedy where the world that the comedians are in is just entirely self-contained and surreal to a large degree, or just or not real. And these early Marx Brothers movies seem to really inhabit that world, at least, or when they're in it. That's the world that we're seeing, and that's the same with a Mel Brooks movie, and it's the same with the Monty Python movie. There is this other form of comedy that I do really like, which is like very grounded in reality, like Ricky Gervais's The Office, or Albert Brooks's movies. Even a movie like Defending Your Life, which is not a real premise, but everything that happens is happening as if it, everybody's treating it as if it's quite real, and everybody in that world is fairly like serious for the most
Yes, it's
part.
level. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like that style, which I still like, is basically the one that has been dominating for quite a long time. And it seems like you're agreeing with that, because the Marx Brothers, you don't see that sort of Marx Brothers element.
Yeah, yeah, because people, not people, all people, but
The world at large.
yeah, there's a need for things to either mean something or for it to be really relatable. Like everybody, like what things are meant to be. People want things to be really real now, it seems.
Yeah.
And even even the things that weren't real before, like superhero movies, like there's the introduction to like, you know, they're very serious. They're not as fun as they maybe used to be, because that's not what life is like, you
Yeah.
know. So I think that's part of it. There's this if it doesn't feel like you could be living it, then maybe it doesn't seem like it's entering the zeitgeist, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
Do you have any? I'm sorry to put you on the spot like this, and if your answer is just no, that's fine. But do you have any theories as to why that is? Like, why do you think people are? And I don't know. I don't necessarily know myself, but why? Why is that? Because you're absolutely right that people have this need to feel like what they're seeing could really happen, even if you have to suspend your disbelief when it's like a superhero movie. But even in the superhero movies, as you're saying, it's not like the Adam West Batman anymore. It's a
Right.
it's a gritty, realistic.
Mhm.
If Batman existed in the real world, what would it look like? If these characters existed in the real world, what would that look like? Do you have any speculation, at least, as to why we're seeing that move?
I don't know. Like my automatic response for some reason is like social media. But then I'm like, maybe it is that. Maybe it is something to do with that. Like people like posting statuses about mundane things. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like adding importance to the most mundane things about everybody's daily lives. Suddenly it means that everything needs to have importance, you know? And I
yeah,
guess maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe it's just overexposure of emotions.
yeah,
Like it means that everything has to have emotion in it to be relatable.
yeah.
I don't know. That's just off the top of my head. I don't know. Um, but I don't like it. I'll tell you that. Like like I love those things. I love that when things are heavy and but I don't like things that are. I'm not going to be like Martin Scorsese right now, or like all these people on Twitter who are complaining about Marvel movies. But I don't need my Marvel movies to be that serious.
Right.
And I would take a boring Pirates of the Caribbean movie that's dumb and goofy before I would take something that's super serious like that. But I don't know. I'm just rambling. But
No, but I mean that's almost where the Marx Brothers should come in handy, because they would be around to kind of cut the seriousness of those kinds of things, right?
and I guess we have Adam Sandler movies. You know what I mean? I guess we do have movies that don't have that. I maybe just don't love them. You know?
Yeah, because the other part of it is that like everything, it can be done really well or it can be done really badly,
Right.
and there's, on the one hand, if just to talk about Mel Brooks, there's Young Frankenstein, and then on the other
Mhm.
hand, there's Life Stinks,
Right. Yep.
and
Which I
and
haven't seen. I haven't seen that
oh,
one. But
it's not great.
you know what though? Like, sorry, it just brought me to mind of someone who mentioned the surreal and crazy qualities of the Marx Brothers were present in the movie Anchorman. I heard somewhere, and
Oh
that
yeah,
made me
yeah,
think, yes, that's true. Like those Will Ferrell movies, and there are movies like of that ilk that kind of have a loose plot, but then they do go off on these weird tangents,
yeah,
sometimes erupting into crazy violence. Um, and I do get a kick out of that stuff sometimes, for sure.
yeah.
So they are still around, but certainly no one takes them seriously.
No, no, that's true. Yeah, I think Amanda
Well,
actually is a very good example
yeah,
of that.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
certainly.
that's fine. People don't need to take it seriously. It just needs to
No.
be funny, I guess.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, But again, like, sorry, I'll stop this after this. Just a little rant about how things used to be. But I remember as a kid, like those movies were pretty pervasive. Like the Naked Gun. You'd see the Naked Gun. You'd see Hot Shots.
Yeah.
The movie I was just thinking about the other day was UHF.
Yeah, that's the best. I love you. We've played that a bunch of times actually at the theaters.
Yeah, that's a great movie, and it's exactly that kind of movie. You know, it's that sort of silly movie where you know, it veers into the surreal, and it's and everything's a joke, and it's a great movie.
And Weird Al is probably bigger than he's ever been, like, or as big as he's ever been. Like he's so that people still like that stuff. Obviously, I don't know why. I'm trying to think of what recent spoofs have been. Like there have been the Scary Movie films, I guess.
Yeah.
And there's probably been some other ones, but I don't know. They don't make those spoofs like they used to, right?
No, that's that's true. That's true. And also they don't have to be spoofs, right? Like I mean, Anchorman is not. I guess it's not a spoof, and Duck Soup isn't either. But they certainly, the spoof lends itself to that kind of humor. But
I think the high concept comedy like that, I think, is kind of gone. Isn't really happening anymore. Like especially recently. And that's kind of a something to do with, you know, what the Hollywood wants to actually put in theaters. I think, you know, with you know, tentpole, right? And so a 3-hour Marvel film or a Batman film is more of a sure thing. So putting money in something that's weird, you know, probably a little bit less of a incentive to do that when you're not sure if it's going to work. But
but that's why I love Duck Soup. It is a very weird movie. I mean, it's not like you're not going to watch and go, oh, that's weird, but it is like, it's just it's unusual. It's going down a lot of zany roads, and but also does it incredibly well, and it has 3 great performers in it, who are just at the top of their craft in terms of performance. Do you have any final thoughts about Duck Soup that you would like to discuss?
There's just one more thing I wanted to mention that I was thinking about, which was that, interestingly, is that it was like a pre-code film. So like pre-Hays Code, pre-ratings. And I think it's really amusing that, you know, you've got like, which basically means a lot of kind of like low cut gowns and also, but also maybe one of the funniest things is that Harpo ends up in bed with a horse, because that's more acceptable than him being in bed with a woman, which I think is very amusing and very indicative of why that code exists. It's very, very funny.
It is very funny.
Yeah,
that joke. It goes through stages too, because it is. So you know, he rides up on Harpo rides up on his horse. They're about to go to war, so it's like, you know, the soldier on the eve of battle. A woman calls him up to the room, and then you see the first joke is you see the shoes at the foot of the bed. So you see her shoes, you see his shoes, but then you see the horse shoes, and that's funny enough. But then they cut up, and there's the girl is in the one bed, and then Harpo and the horse are in the other bed.
Yeah, no, it's a good little gag. I don't know. Like, final thoughts. I just think, it's a wacky, wild movie, and it's pretty much pure uncut, like just comedy, and there's with no frills, nothing attached, and I think for some it probably takes a bit of energy to get through, because it is so high, fast-paced, high energy, and you can't really get a breath. But if you're into that kind of humor, then it's just catnip, you know. It's amazing, and you can just watch it over and over again. You could probably watch it twice in a row, just because you miss so much and you laugh every time. I laugh every time I watch it, for sure. And like you, I laugh out loud. Like, I actually am by myself, and when Harpo like puts his feet in the guy's lemonade, I'm just like laughing.
And I will say, because you said that you could show the movie to your son, and I have made, I think, a bit of a convert to the Marx Brothers with my daughter, because when I told her I was going to watch Duck Soup for this, because I was watching it Monday night, later at night, she said, "Oh, I wish I could stay up and watch it with you."
Oh, wow!
Yeah, so that was pretty phenomenal.
I long to hear something like that. That would be great.
Yeah, well, in a couple of years, but I think the first one she did watch. She's watched Duck Soup with me before. She watched it a few years ago with me, and more recently, when all the Marx Brothers movies were up on Criterion, and I guess the Coconuts is up there right now. But there's a few others that they had up there a few months ago. She watched Animal Crackers with me and thought it was hilarious. So
that's great.
Yeah, so she is a big fan of it, and
I think we started with Go West a few years ago, and maybe that's why we haven't watched another one. So,
See, I have not seen Go West.
I can't. I've seen it, but I couldn't tell you anything about it. I don't remember.
Yeah, and of course the key line, and here I'll just crib from Gilbert Gottfried, who does does the line a lot. Who I guess what's the one, A Night in Casablanca? That's the last one.
I think so. Yeah.
And they do that one. So you'll remember earlier on in the podcast, Daniel said that if Harpo's harp ever went missing, it was because Chico hawked it to pay off his gambling debts. Well, the reason why they ended up making, I think, it was A Night at Casablanca, right? That they make.
I think so. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
The line that Groucho said, just in reference to that movie, was, Chico needed the money.
That's it. Yeah. And that's brotherly love. I love that they got together and made a mediocre comedy just because Chico needed to pay off some debts.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
Well, and they were a very close family. Like, apparently, and this is a bit. Maybe we should end on the sad note, but I'm going to anyway. Gummo died, I think, just days before Groucho did, or a very close proximity.
I didn't know that. Okay.
But Groucho at the time was so close to death that nobody told him that his brother died before that, because they thought it would be too much, it'd be too traumatic for him to hear. So they kept that news from him. So they were very, very close. I'm obsessed with Gummo stories because he's the one Marx Brother you never see.
I don't know much about Gummo. Yeah, I just know he didn't love the stage. Yeah, and I guess he wasn't too good at it. But yeah. Yeah,
and never. I'm assuming he is kind of just like a pre-Zeppo. But I'd love if there was more to that story, like if he had his own unique character or whatever. And
I don't know what he did. I don't think he did. I think Zeppo just took over his role. Right. And I don't know what happened to him after. Like, I know Zeppo left the team and became like a Hollywood agent, but I don't know.
He got into raincoats.
For real? Yeah.
Yeah. He's a raincoat salesman. Well, I've heard two things. I've heard both that he was a raincoat salesman, but also that he and Zeppo opened like a creative talent agency, which kind of opened the door to a lot of people like Jack Benny and people like that. So
okay, I didn't know that. I didn't realize they were doing that together. Okay.
I guess both could be true. I don't know. I guess maybe when he wasn't fostering Jack Benny, he was selling raincoats. I'm not sure, but
you never know if Jack Benny's not going to make it. You got to have the raincoats in your back pocket.
That's why all the early Jack Benny performances, he was wearing raincoats.
That's right, all of them, everyone.
Hey, Jack, before you go on, wear this. They'll love it. They'll love it in Poughkeepsie.
Tell them how dry you are. Tell them you're so dry.
Can it be cheap? No, dry. You're dry. Well, we'll wrap it up there, but thank you, Daniel, for coming on. Again, you were on the last time talking about Night of the Hunter, and this time Duck Soup, and I definitely hope you come back and talk about another one of our favorite movies. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I would love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks so much. And for those of you who are watching, I do just want to say that if you like this video, please feel free to give it the old like there. And if you haven't yet subscribed to J Hutch Talks Too Much, please feel free to do that. And if you're listening on Apple Podcast, please feel free to rate and review the podcast as well. Oh, before we go, one more time, Daniel, let us know about your theaters.
Yes, please come see movies at, if you're in Toronto, the Fox Theatre in the East End. If you're in Kitchener, the Apollo Cinema downtown, and in downtown Ottawa, the Bytown Cinema. Lots of nice, modern, independent art films, lots of kind of Oscar-nominated releases currently, and lots of interesting, fun rep titles that are playing pretty regularly. So take a look, check out the websites, and hope we'll see you there. Good popcorn too.
It is good popcorn. In fact, we went to the Apollo to specifically get the popcorn during the pandemic. So yeah, absolutely. And I've been to all of Daniel's theaters that I have been able to get to so far. And it's a fantastic experience, and I wholeheartedly recommend it if you haven't gone to either of those theaters. So thank you so much, Daniel. Much appreciated, and great to have you on. Hope you come back. But I'll wrap things up, and we'll see everybody on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.